Hello, Sego, Ani, Kathleen LaForme Dijnika, Hamilton Dinjiba, Nishnabekwe. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kathleen LaForme, the Indigenous Diabetes Health Circle's Diabetes Wellness Coordinator. So we're talking about diabetes in the Indigenous community today. So we're just going to cover what is diabetes, the different types of diabetes, signs and symptoms of type 2 diabetes, the risk factors for developing type 2 diabetes, some of the complications that can happen and why they happen, and type 2 Indigenous communities, and the rise of type 2 diabetes in our Indigenous youth and children, and what can we do? Just get right into there. So a little bit about our bodies. So when we eat food, it breaks down, and all this food breaks down into a product called glucose, or in other words, it's known as sugar. So it's our body's main fuel. So that is everything that we need to have energy, right? So just like a car needs gas, we need that glucose. And so our bodies are really unique machines. So it's like big factories going on all over parts of our body. So that food that we eat, there's all kinds of enzymes and hormones and proteins and everything that are going in there to try and break that down and use it as best as we can. So this glucose travels to all parts of our body and throughout our bloodstream. So, and then an insulin or hormone produced in our organ called the pancreas helps the glucose to enter our body cells to use this for energy. So some glucose is left in the blood as a backup supply, and then the glucose left behind is called blood sugar, or our blood glucose. And the blood glucose levels can be measured by a test, right? So I know people have seen a glucometer. So then you poke your finger and test the blood. So this is kind of a diagram, kind of just to follow kind of things, what happens when we're eating our food. So we eat the food, our body turns it into the glucose, and the blood sugar level goes up. Our brain receives the message that there's too much sugar in the blood, or there's a whole batch of energy coming in. What are we going to do with it? So then the brain tells the pancreas to release the insulin. So the insulin links with the glucose molecules, or the sugar, and it helps to open that cell door so that the glucose can be used for energy. So that cell takes it and eats it up. So the extra glucose left in the that the body doesn't need is stored in the liver for emergency use. And this is such things as all of a sudden we need to run for some reason, or we need a burst of energy all of a sudden for some reason. So that's that backup supply that's used. And so then the blood sugar returns to a normal balance, so 4 to 7 millimoles per liter. So we'll talk about those levels later on down the road. So what is diabetes? And diabetes mellitus is the medical term for it. So it's a chronic disease in which we can't use that glucose and insulin properly. So it's kind of characterized by chronic hyperglycemia, and this is higher than normal blood sugar levels. So, and then not enough glucose used by the body cells, or the glucose can't get into the body cells, and too much is left in the blood. So too much glucose in the blood and not enough in the body cells can lead to serious and sometimes fatal complications, which is really important to monitor that, and we'll talk about that as well. So here's another picture there, kind of general things. So, but kind of the same thing in the previous picture. So what this is diabetes. So we eat the food, our body turns it into glucose, and our blood sugar level goes up. The brain receives that message, too much sugar in the blood, and the brain tells the pancreas to release insulin. So if the pancreas doesn't release or doesn't produce any insulin, this is type 1 diabetes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then the glucose stays in the blood. If the pancreas makes some insulin, but not enough to get all the glucose out of our body cells, or the cell doors won't open, this is called type 2 diabetes, and too much sugar stays in the blood. So, so in type 1, a person must take insulin injections for the rest of their life. Or they manage blood sugar levels by eating healthy, being active, sometimes taking insulin or other oral medications to help use that glucose. So too much sugar in the blood over long periods of time can lead to serious diabetes complications, such as nerve damage, vision loss or blindness, kidney damage or failure, erectile dysfunction, heart disease, gum disease, and amputations. So this is, and we'll explain a little bit more about that too. So the insulin function in the body. So how does insulin work? So it takes the glucose across the cell membranes, converting glucose into glycogen, which is stored in the liver and muscles, and assisting the conversion of excess glucose to fat. And this prevents proteins from being used for energy. So I'm just gonna stop there for a minute and kind of use a visual that we have. So this has been a kid's toy that we've adapted, and a lot of people help to use this as a visual thing. So this is a body cell that's blown up, represents a body cell blown up a bazillion times. And this is big, nice, healthy body cell. It's all open, and then we have, this is a glucose molecule. You can see that it's kind of like a cubed. It's a lot of different kind of sides. This is glucose. This is the glucose molecule. So and then my hand is going to represent the insulin. Okay, so we have this nice body cell in our body. So we eat that food, and then the glucose is brought down and it's in our bloodstream. So it's going in our bloodstream. So my hand, the insulin comes and helps connect that glucose molecule, and it helps take that glucose into that body cell. So the body cell uses this energy, eats it up, and goes on to thrive. Okay. So that's normally what happens. Okay. So once again, this is the body cell, nice healthy body cell. The glucose is here. It's in our bloodstream. But it's just there, and there's no insulin. So there's no insulin to break this in there. So what's happened is that body cell is not getting the energy, so it's going to die. So it's going to shrivel up and die off. Okay. And then, so we need to figure out and manage and see what we can do to help those body cells, right? So sometimes, here's that body cell, and the insulin takes the glucose, but it's not too sure on how to do that, how to get it into that body cell, right? So it's just still floating around out there, and then it may not end up getting into that body cell. It's just one of those examples. Okay. All right, so there's different types of diabetes. Okay, there's 3 main types. So type 1, this is usually happens in children and young adults, and you have to have need to take artificial insulin, and you have to take that for the rest of your lives. You also have to monitor everything that you eat or any exercise you do. Type 2 diabetes is when the insulin is not working properly, or our pancreas doesn't make enough insulin, or our bodies don't know how to use it. And this usually happens in adults, but we've seen an increase in children as young as 6 developing type 2 diabetes, which is alarming. And we'll also talk about that later on. Gestational diabetes occurs during pregnancy, and it usually goes away after giving birth, but it becomes a risk for mom to develop type 2 diabetes later on, and also that baby to develop chances of developing type 2 later on in life as well. So we have pre-diabetes. So this is not a diagnosis of diabetes, but it's characterized by impaired glucose tolerance, and it's a risk factor for developing diabetes. So there may be a period when your blood glucose levels are higher than normal, but not as high to make a diagnosis of diabetes. And this is referred to the impaired glucose tolerance or impaired fasting glucose. People with those are at increased risk for developing type 2 diabetes. The risk can be reduced by making healthier lifestyle choices and maintaining a healthy body weight. So by losing some weight, that really helps with body management and being able to use the glucose properly. And some people call this period pre-diabetes. And so, like I mentioned, it's not a type of diabetes. And I'm just gonna stop sharing for a minute again and use that body cell again. So yeah, so this is our healthy body cell. And so what happens sometimes is that the body cell is not quite open. And so the insulin can't get the glucose in there. So this is, it's not opening to let the insulin come in. So it's impaired glucose, right? So we can't get that in there. So that's what happens. But then when we start making healthier choices or are able to help our bodies be better, then that cell will open up and then it becomes a healthy cell, and then the insulin can get in and the glucose can get in there and give it energy that it needs. So there's a lot of signs and symptoms of type 2 diabetes that people could be living with. And it's important to understand that and identify these signs and symptoms early to make appropriate choices, right? So our bodies are really talking to us. We just need to learn to listen, right? And regain that connection with our body, because, sometimes we have different things going on. We're tired a lot, getting a lot of headaches. So we kind of just really need to listen to our bodies and kind of figure out what's really going on, right? So, and we know that we're all individual and people are different. So some people may experience some of these symptoms, and so some may not experience any at all, or they may experience them but not really know that they're a symptom. Some of these signs and symptoms are unusual thirst, being really, really tired, blurred vision, going to the bathroom a lot, as I mentioned, headaches, cuts or scrapes that don't heal within a normal time, right? So they just there, and it seems like it takes forever to heal. Gaining weight or losing weight with not really doing anything different. Tingling in the hands, legs, and feet are kind of a symptom as well. And sometimes people will get like this tingling in their cheeks, and that's kind of a sign too. Difficulty getting or maintaining an erection for men, digestive problems, frequent or recurring infections. Women are prone to a lot of yeast infections. Men can get it too, but women, it's recurring a lot. So, and then sometimes there's no symptoms at all, right? So sometimes people can be living with type 2 diabetes for many years without knowing it, and so not getting a diagnosis until something really serious is going on. So, in our lives today, we're really busy. Sometimes, we're going to work and we're rushing, that type of thing. So, having a bad day, you come home and you're so tired, you just want to lay on the couch and kind of rest for a minute. You're dealing with a headache, things bother you a lot. And so, over time, this is kind of like, we just chalk it up to a bad day, right? We're having a rough day. But too many of these rough days is kind of that alarm, right? So we want to kind of make sure that we are listening and watching these things. So risk factors. So being Indigenous ancestry, being overweight, eating an unhealthy diet, other family members having diabetes, getting little or no exercise, so activity is important, having had gestational diabetes or given birth to a large baby, over 9 pounds, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, having a lot of stress. Stress does a lot on our bodies. And smoking. Smoking impairs that circulation. So that's a lot of things that are going on. So there's complications. So I'm just going to stop there for a minute and going to show my other visuals that I have. So we have these, they call my glucose sticks. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So one is a normal blood sugar level and one is a high level. So when I tip these over, you kind of see that movement. So I think you can guess which one is high blood sugar and which one is the low blood sugar or regular blood sugar, right? So we kind of see that. So that's kind of that movement. So we need that ready to get out to all the body cells, right? And we see that this clumped up there at the top. Right? So in this kind of, I'll talk about in the complications there, this may be what can be happening, right? So that so some of these complications that we can get, and some are very, very serious, right? So there's blindness. So type 2 diabetes is the #1 cause of blindness in Canada. Heart disease and stroke, kidney problems, or nephropathy, that's what it's called, amputations, nerve damage or neuropathy, sexual dysfunction, digestive problems, so GI problems. So just want to kind of share kind of my personal story with diabetes, right? So diabetes wasn't known in Indigenous communities until 1946. And that kind of tells us a lot, and we'll kind of talk about that more. But both my parents were living with type 2 diabetes for many years and started getting the complications setting in. And they would try to do their best, but not really. So my mom eventually became diagnosed blind. My dad had a stroke, but it wasn't really a stroke. When I talked about these, the blood kind of cell thing, what had happened is that little part that's really thick. So the blood gets really thick when you have high blood glucose, right? So, and you can see that how that kind of clumps together. So what happened is one of these clumps slowed down in his bloodstream in his brain, but not enough to cause a stroke to burst the blood vessel. It just slowed down long enough to do some damage where there wasn't the oxygen getting to and the energy that part of the brain. So so that sludge just moved on, but didn't cause any damage in his brain, but it still caused damage in his body. So he was kind of limited movement on his left side with his wrist and his ankle. So that wouldn't work right. So, which eventually led to amputation, a lower leg amputation, and so a lot of other things. And, so it can be very, very serious, right? And we know that things they're happening. So this kind of explains a little bit more. So we have excess glucose in the bloodstream, right? And so this, the body has to work really hard to get the blood throughout the body, right? And then, which leads to high blood pressure because the pump has to work hard. The blood has to work harder. Those veins and arteries are getting clogged up. The blood is thick, can't move as fast as it normally would. And these glucose molecules, they're sharp edges on them, right? So I don't know if anyone's ever spilled sugar on the counter and then later you go to wipe it up and it's been hard and it's kind of scrapey, it scratches you. So this is kind of like in our bloodstream too, the glucose molecules are a little sharp. So they cause damage from the inside and cause nerve damage as well. So when nerve damage occurs, then not enough blood carrying oxygen and energy can reach these damaged areas. And, because of the constant high blood pressure, internal nerve damage and lack of blood flow, many complications can arise. I have another visual to share with you. You can see this. So this is a red blood cell blown up a bazillion times as well. And this is going through our bloodstream. So normally this just flows through with our white blood cells, our platelets, all that good stuff going on. The red blood cells carry the energy, the oxygen to parts of our body. And so, over time, our glucose molecules are coming in our bloodstream and they start attaching to the red blood cells, right? So in a couple, that's that normal energy that we need to kind of that boost. But over time, more of these getting attached to that red blood cell, you can see that a lot can gather on there of high blood sugar levels, right? And sometimes there's body cells where only one of these can just barely squeeze through into that cell. And if we have a lot of sharp edges on here, that's causing that nerve damage. That cuts the nerve endings, it cuts the sides of the body cells. And then, without that being able to get in there, and the glucose that normally would go in with the insulin doesn't get there, and the cell can't be repaired, and then we start having the body cells die off. Okay, so this is how it looks in our bodies. So I'm going to explain some of the complications that can arise because they're very serious. And the sooner that we know that these can happen to us and what's going on, the sooner that we can make the choices to prevent those and stop them from happening. And also kind of like the more we understand, knowledge is power, right? And so with that, we make more informed choices. We make better choices. So sexual dysfunction impacts both men and women. And it because the blood flow can't get to where it needs. So, but proper management, we can prevent these issues with sexual dysfunction. So, this is important to talk about because, if more of our young people are getting type 2 diabetes and these complications are setting in and not managed well, what's going to happen later in life? So if they're not able to have sex, which makes babies, where does that leave us as a people, right? So there are a lot of many forgotten traditional teachings around sex. Problematic things are not just by men, but women are also having sexual dysfunction issues. And so it's really important to kind of get that get on top of those things, right? So in these teachings, we were taught on preparation, that self-respect, respect to others, the sense of purpose to procreate, and the roles and responsibilities that these teachings can help us to engage in healthy lifestyle behaviors. My nephew got diagnosed in his later teens with type 2 diabetes. And he was about 16, and he still wanted to, hang out with his friends and still, kind of party when he was like 18, 19, and kind of carrying on. And he started to become like kind of really unwell, and he knew that, right? And so kind of, as my role as an auntie and also as a diabetes worker, trying to help him with that awareness. Of course, I would talk about different things that can happen, and, they would just kind of, when you're young, you're invincible, right? So I just kind of put it blank to him. I had to, kind of tell him it's a serious issue, right? And I said, if you don't be careful and these complications getting set in, that you won't be able to use your penis anymore. you won't be able to, have an erection anymore. And he's like, oh, get out of here, Auntie. You're just, just fibbing to me. And like, no, it is serious. It's really serious issue that can happen with the complications that come with type 2 diabetes. So that kind of really hit home to him. And he went on and stopped, kind of partying as much, taking better care of himself. And today he's happily married with 5 kids. So it was really, kind of those messages. We kind of really, we tiptoe around things. Some of these is taboo. We don't really want to talk about it, but there's serious issues that should be talked about. And hopefully, to help our people, right? To help to, be as well as we can be. So, again, so other complications, the heart attack and stroke. And I talked a little bit about my dad's the stroke with that blood vessel getting really thick. So as the body excess fat dumps in the arteries, right? So we get clogged arteries, we get cholesterol buildup, and combined with that, the cholesterol and then the high sticky blood sugar levels, that can cause a clot really fast. It can cause a clot sooner than later, and that's kind of the issues that we have to break. So with the heart, the buildup of the fatty deposits and cause blood pressure to build up, right? So, and then the narrowing of the vessels, causing the heart to work harder, pump the blood through the body. And over time, then the heart can fail, right? So it breaks down. So it's working overtime, it's working hard. It can't get the blood to pump out where it needs, and then that's the heart attack occurs, right? And so, so then damage is occurred then. A stroke happens when a blood clot develops in one of the blood vessels leading to the brain, right? And I talked a little bit about that. And so the blood clot affects the brains. It stops oxygen from reaching where it needs to go to that part of the brain. And the level of brain damage depends on the length of time the person's brain was not receiving that oxygen, right? And also where in the brain it happens determines what kind of complications happen to the rest of our body with that. So other things with kidney function, a lot of the people are on dialysis, and this is our kidney's main function is to take the toxins out of our body, right? And so it passes that through our urine, right? So in our, it's kind of, it's like the filter, right? It's the filter flushing out those toxins. So, and if the body is really having high blood glucose levels, the kidneys are continuously working, right? So again, so our brain gets messages from all parts of our body, right? And just like when it tells there's too much sugar in the blood, it sends a message to the pancreas to release the insulin. But over time, if there's still too much blood, the brain sends a message to the kidneys to start remove those toxins out of the bloodstream, right? And so that's when so you're going to the bathroom a lot. So our kidneys are working overtime. They're needing to flush out things. But if they can't get the energy and the oxygen that those cells in the kidneys need, then that damage can occur, right? So, and kidney failure can occur over time. And sometimes people are getting kidney failure and then not knowing that they were living with type 2 diabetes and get diagnosed upon that. It's really important. So it looks kind of like a catch-22 with the kidneys, right? So the more you drink, the more it's flushing out. But if the body's not working well, or insulin's not working well to get the glucose out of the blood into the body cells, then that's just that continuous cycle until something happens. Dental problems, so that's also a serious condition. Gums disease is more common and severe in people with unmanaged glucose levels, type 2 diabetes, because of the lack of the oxygen, the lack of the energy to those body cells, can't nourish those cells of the mouth, right? So, and they increase inflammation as well, right? So it's really important to take care of your teeth. I said my family members, a lot of them living with type 2 diabetes. And my dad had very healthy teeth. He didn't have a cavity all his life, but when he was 32, he had what's called periodontitis, so gum disease, and he had to get all his teeth removed. So without a cavity, but then having to get that, and then it was just a couple of years later, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And we're thinking that he probably had type 2 diabetes for a number of years before this, but then that's kind of what happened to him. So, it's important to, make sure you take care of your teeth and gums, so lower the risk of the periodontitis and gingivitis. We hear the gingivitis on those mouthwash and toothpaste commercials. So so it's really important as well. Loss of vision, right? So as I mentioned that the blindness, diabetes is the #1 cause of blindness in Canada, right? And I know when you're a kid, you kind of put that blindfold on, right? And that's when you think you're blind, so everything's dark, you can't see anything. But in reality, blindness is loss of vision. You still could see maybe shapes or light, but you can't really see faces or read things. You can't read things from far away. And so that's they have a level, right? So a level of 20/20 with perfect vision, and those with glasses, you have different levels. So you know that you have to wear glasses for nearsighted or farsighted again. But damage done to our eyes, because those blood vessels are so tiny in our eyes and behind our eyes to the retinas and things, those can become severely compromised, right? So that lack of the blood flow, lack of the energy to those body cells leads to that damage, right? So, and it's the prolonged high blood levels, glucose levels leads to that blurry vision or blindness, right? So we talked about blurred vision as sometimes as symptoms, and that because your glucose levels are really high, and so that kind of impairs that liquid that's in our eye, right? So it gets kind of cloudy, and so that's when you get that blurred vision. So we want to make sure that you really take care of this too, and make sure that you get those screening for retinopathy, right? So it's important. So retina is a thin, light-sensitive tissue that lines the inside surface of the eye. And those are body cells too. So they need that energy. They need that insulin to help that energy get to those cells. And so diabetic retinopathy occurs when there's damage to the small blood vessels that nourish tissue and nerve cells in the retina. It's important to make sure you get your eye tests. And then there's also eye specialists, ophthalmologists, optometrists. So they each are specialized in different levels of eyes and eye care. So neuropathy, so this is kind of the lower extremities. We'll get a lot more information in that with the Foot Care 101 session that we're going through. But, so kind of just still talk about this. So lack of that blood flow and damage to blood vessels and nerves can cause loss of sensation to the lower extremities, our feet and their legs, right? So they're the furthest away from our heart, right? So if we have that slow blood flow, the heart pumping, get circulation issues, then that energy in the blood is not getting to where it needs to be, right? So also if a person gets can lose sensation to our feet and toes. So we're not aware that there's an injury like a cut or a scrape or a broken bone there. Infection can sit on without them knowing or feeling anything, right? So this happens over time. And so this, because the injury can go untreated and worsen over time really fast, right? So sometimes people may get a nick on their foot or toe and not know it. And then they get up the next day and they look down and there's a black toe or there's a big black spot on their foot or their leg, or there's a wound that's really big there. And so this is very serious, right? So it's sometimes it's too late for the healthcare provider to properly treat the infected area by the time that help is sought. And so in these cases, there's a higher risk for amputation. So if you can see the little diagram on the lower right hand, so the one side is a very healthy, that's our neutrons and nerves and going through our body, they're in our body. And over time that these, the coating on these nerve nerves can get damaged, right? And it wears away at that protective sheath. And you'll get more information when you learn more about the foot care issues and that. But this is what's happening. So loss of sensation over time, right? So it also can happen in your fingers and hands as well. But you know, sometimes you may step on a tack or something, and you're not feeling it. So it's important to be aware and make sure that you take the precautions. So what impacts our blood glucose? So, you know, it's a lot of things impact it, different levels. Things happen to people living with or without diabetes as well, but it's really important to know what's going on if to prevent diabetes, but also with living, if you're diagnosed with living with type 2 diabetes. So it's important to monitor. So these things that really impact the glucose is what you ate or drank, or what you didn't eat or drink, right? So like I said, when we eat food, all that goes into our body and it gets made into that glucose, right? And if we can't use that, then that some foods really impact our blood glucose levels faster than others. Some things break down really fast and shoots that blood sugar really high, really fast, right? And so then if the body can't kick in, then those high blood sugar levels are there for a while. And then it's important to know that we need to kind of monitor that, stay on top of that. Stress levels really impact blood glucose, right? So any type of stress, our body's the function is to release that extra energy. So we need that glucose, and the glucose levels go higher in stress levels, right? So to anticipate that extra energy. But sometimes we have chronic stress. It's there for a long time. So those higher elevated blood glucose levels there. So that kind of is really important to kind of look at and monitor that as well. Our exercise and activity. So when we exercise, it helps our body use the glucose, helps that lower that blood glucose level, right? So if we don't, then we don't really use it as fast. Medication, taken or not. So some people are prescribed medications for type 2 diabetes or other things. Some things, and they might, so some of these medications help us to use the insulin, or help us to use the energy level, or make more insulin. So a lot of different things with that. But also not to ignore the warning levels on like cough and cold medications. They have some of them have a lot of sugar in them, really not knowing it, and but other things, other products in them that raise blood glucose levels as well. Smoking, the smoking impacts that circulation levels as well, so that impacts those. Water intake. Water is really important to take on a regular basis. Drink your water. Water is important, right? So our bodies are made up of 70–80% of water, so we really need that. So kind of, especially in the warmer weather. Warmer weather's happening in summertime, right? So it's really tend to get dehydrated and not knowing. This, impacts our blood flow, right? So you're getting dehydrated, then your blood gets thicker, and living with type 2 diabetes combined with that, then you're at more risk getting dehydrated during these times. But also to help give our bodies and blood that more of the liquid energy, right? Also the moon phase. The moon phase affects our bodies, right? So that's an important teaching that kind of some people have forgotten or aren't aware of. But if we know that full moon, there's a high energy out there. We know that it affects the tides, right? So we hear that the tide comes in full moon and that. So just as us, like I said, we mentioned that we're 70–80% of water, right? So the moon phase is going to affect us. So the new moon, the full moon, and there's a lot of teachings around that. And we have an awesome grandmother Renee Thomas Hill has kind of reminded us and gives us those teachings about that. So it does have an impact. So just So it's really important to manage our glucose levels, right? So when you're living with type 2 diabetes, we talk about the optimum levels. So there's recommended targets. So people on, you get diagnosed, you get a glucometer and you poke your finger to test these blood sugar levels. But you also get sent to the lab to get these blood sugar levels, right? So, and then there's a hemoglobin A1C test, and this is different than a blood glucose fasting test. So this A1C test, this is where the red blood cell comes into effect. And so the A1C test checks and monitors the levels of these glucose molecules on the red blood cell. So the red blood cell's lifespan is 30 to 90 days, right? So 30 to 90 days have left. And over time, high blood glucose levels attach to these red blood cells. And so this A1C test gives on average of what your blood sugar levels were over those 30 to 90 days. And so it's a much more accurate indicator, especially if someone hasn't been diagnosed. It's a much, it's an accurate thing, because when we have fasting blood glucose test, you get sent to the lab with that. So you can't eat after midnight, right? And so you go and get this test done. So then they test, and that, so the normal blood glucose level should be between 4 and 7 on that glucometer, and also in the lab testing their levels, how they test. 2 hours postprandial, so after 2 hours after you ate, can be between 5 and 10, right? But then also it's a little bit lower if your A1C targets are not being met. So in A1C, you want to be below 7%, right? So that's the average level. So that is different than the fasting blood glucose level or the test that you do on your glucose machine. So it's just important to make sure that you know the difference. You can only get the A1C at the lab right now. And it can be taken any time of the day. You don't have to fast for that. So recommended screening. So the recommended screening for is 1 to 2 years if you have more than one risk factors, right? So if you're more, then you want to make sure that you're aware. Screening every 2 years be considered from age 10 or established puberty, especially if living with more than one risk factor. So these modifiable risk factors starting in childhood, so example, being overweight, lack of physical activity, unhealthy eating, impaired fasting glucose, has kind of, we want to make sure that we're on top of those and get tested, maybe tested more than average. So how is diabetes diagnosed? And I just talked a little bit about that, but can only be diagnosed by a medical doctor or nurse practitioner. It's not in the scope of us as healthcare workers or registered practice for other healthcare professionals. So we can help people to understand what the levels are and what to be worried about, and also, those signs and symptoms, and advise them to get the test that's needed or see their healthcare provider. Right? So, and it's done through the results of these blood tests. So if it's higher than the upper limit of these normal levels, then it's a diagnosis of diabetes, or then they'll look and see if it's a pre-diabetes. Right? So, we want to we want to help our clients and our communities, and so when people are testing their glucose levels and it's higher than out of the range, the normal range, we want to help them with that. We don't want to be too alarmed and make them too alarmed, but we also want to make sure that they get the healthcare that they need. They want to make sure that they get those checks, get those screenings, but we don't really want to make that diagnosis for them, right? So it's, like I said, can only be made by the medical doctor or healthcare professional. So, and I mentioned, so our role, you know, so not to diagnose, but help our community members, right? So through that, so helping with education, help them to learn and know what it is. The supports, also the, you know, supports are really important step in that. So being the best then we can be. Connecting them to the appropriate services, right? So the healthcare providers, traditional cultural services, this is an important part of that. Right? So, and you know, just kind of you know, feeling what they're feeling, but not being really emotional about it, or trying to, you know, kind of hide our shock sometimes. I've known that we've done screening at different events years ago, and some of the readings on this glucometers would be pretty high, and to not really be shocked or make an alarm, you know, reaction in the faces, or reacting like, you know, oh my goodness kind of thing, but kind of be professional and kind of be there and just give the support that we need, that they need. So what causes diabetes? And we don't know what causes diabetes, because and then that's not what there's no cure, right? So, and contrary to belief, diabetes is not caused by eating too much sugar or from sugar. So, and people don't give themselves diabetes. Just want to mention too that diabetes was unheard of in our Indigenous communities until after the 1940s, right? So later 1940s. So it's kind of new to us, right? So in type 1, they think it's an autoimmune disease where the body's immune system kind of destroys the cells in the pancreas that make insulin. So that's kind of the things that a lot of research is still being done. Diabetes has been out there in the mainstream community for years, and it's you know, research is always ongoing, and to hopefully one day find a cure going on. So the risk for type 2 diabetes is higher if you're overweight. That should not be obsessed. Overweight or obese, and not physically active, right? So it's just, and what happens there is, right, so it's not when our body's not making enough insulin, or our pancreas doesn't able to use the insulin well, or the and the reason that this happens is not well understood. We don't know a lot about that yet. So, but like I said, this research is still being done. A lot of research is working on that, and kind of it was taught that it's a lifestyle disease, but we don't really know that. And so we have to stop the blame game, right? So stop being hard on ourselves, that we could have done better and things, but kind of cope and function with that. When we talk about, you know, diabetes wasn't heard in the Indigenous communities until probably, I think the year that I heard was 1946. So kind of we'll talk about what happens and what thing. But my first experience with quote diabetes was when I was about 6 years old, and my papa used to keep great big those big gallon pickle jars, those big ones, in the fridge, and he had tea in there, and he would go and, you know, pick up the jug and take a few sips every once in a while throughout the day. And then one day I was like, Papa, what is that? And he says, you know, it's for my sugar. Like, okay, for his sugar, right? And so when you're a little kid, you're really curious, and kind of, so we'd sneak and kind of get in there. And if we could lift it, because it was heavy, so get in there and take a sip, like, whoa, okay, it's not sweet. It's a tea, kind of like it's, so when you're a kid, like, okay, this not, there's no sugar in this, but for his sugar. So it kind of was like, you know, it's like, all right, so, but it's a tea. And so as I got older, I kind of remembered that flavor, and later on knew what it was. So it was a tea for to help control his diabetes. So my next experience was I was 10 years old, and my auntie, who was 10 years older than me, got put in the hospital. And, mom and dad's like, okay, auntie has diabetes. So we went to the hospital to visit her, and, she still looked good. She was happy, smiling, and she had this orange, and she had some syringes on the hospital tray there in front of her. And she's like, oh, look, I get to learn how to give myself a needle, but I get to practice on an orange. So she had the orange and the syringe, and she would kind of, show us that she had to inject this orange, and then later she would have to get this medicine and put it in her belly, right? So when she got out of the hospital, she was home. She was still kind of looked normal. She still did everything the same, but other than that, she had to give herself needles. And so it wasn't really that understanding wasn't there. It was just a word, this diabetes. And then later on, of course, my dad got diagnosed, and then I had more aunties, uncles, my mom and my sisters, and kind of like, so what is this, right? What is diabetes? And, a lot of things happening to a lot of my family members. So I had gone to school later in life after I had my girls early. And then when they were school age, I decided to go back to school. And so we had a guest speaker in one of our classes, and was talking about diabetes and the seriousness of it, the high impacts in our Indigenous communities, the stats and stuff. So it's like really alarming. And so from that point on, I kind of went on to learn about diabetes and what it was. So all my classes, anything would do with health or nutrition, I would do my assignments on diabetes and kind of learn that, and knew that, something has to be done. Something has to be done about this. And so that's, and then it led my way into working with SODI, Indigenous Diabetes Health Circle, used to be formerly known as Southern Ontario Aboriginal Diabetes Initiative. And so that's where I got to come in and help people as best as I can. So those are kind of the stats, and we see that, one of the highest risk populations for it, for developing type 2 diabetes. And some of these levels are high. They're from 2011, so which is 10 years ago now, and we know that there's higher rates out there. So kind of really want to look at and see, what's going on, what's happening, and hopefully that more research, and one day we can find out what's really going on. So, and once how it affects us, right? So diagnosed with diabetes at an increasingly younger age. Previously, people weren't screened for type 2 diabetes until after they turned 40, but we see that we're getting younger and younger people, so that we're getting diagnosed earlier and much younger. Have a greater severity at diagnosis, so sometimes people are having heart attacks or kidney failure, going to the hospital and not knowing, and then getting the diagnosis on when they're getting these serious complications happening. They're usually prescribed insulin upon diagnosis, which is, kind of very, very stressful. Like, who wants to give themselves needles, right? So it's kind of that in itself is stressful. We experience poor treatment outcomes. Some of the, sometimes the Western medical field is kind of taught these stereotypes, and with Indigenous communities, so we don't get the best treatment that we possibly can. Change is happening. People are looking at things differently now, and hoping changes out there, but we still have these horrific things that are happening with us, right? So, as mentioned, there's higher rates of kidney disease and amputation and severe retinopathy. So that's, that's blindness. So, higher rates of gestational diabetes are young moms are getting diagnosed at a younger age, whereas previously they would check in older women that were pregnant, but now we see them in our like the 18, 19, and 20s getting gestational diabetes, which is really alarming as well. And we get really higher rates of the risk factors. Yeah, so it's really causes are complex, right? So there's a lot of different things that impact the risk and prevention. So the links between the history of colonization and the higher rates of diabetes in Indigenous people, right? So we know that there's the links of that. We know that there's high rates of generational trauma, grief, intergenerational grief as well. So that we have health inequalities linked to social determinants of health, including, they took us from our homelands, established reserves, drove us out of there, took us to the reserves. We weren't allowed to hunt or gather or harvest any longer on those lands. Colonialism, racism, and social exclusion, access to healthcare, access to education. There's a lot of things listed there, but also that, kind of that loss of that cultural connections, right? So a lot of people struggle with that still. Physical environments, our food insecurity or security, that's huge. It's a huge factor. Yeah, so that's, our stress and unresolved grief also play a huge role in type 2 diabetes. So, I mentioned that there's no cause, but there's a lot of things that would happen, right? And I mentioned those things too, but, we have changes. We had a lot of changes. And so years ago, our ancestors are very healthy people. They used gifts that Mother Earth gave us for sustenance, very active. There was no diabetes or other chronic diseases, right? So we were taught that our lives should be in balance. And people had roles and responsibilities. We weren't like how we are now. We had to look after and help with huge communities, right? So a lot of people in the villages, there wasn't these single families looking after each other or looking after ourselves. It was we looked after everyone, so we all came together to be healthy and well and live, thrive, and did that for many, many years until they came in and colonized and socialized us. So, and we see that today there's diabetes and a lot of chronic diseases. We eat foreign foods and a lot of processed foods, which are high in sugar, fat, and salt, a lot of preservatives. We were not exact as we used to be. So we kind of look at this as our ancestors' diet, right? And we think all those things that Mother Earth gives us, things from the land, air, water. So those natural foods that we could get. So kind of ask yourself, and we ask, like, if our ancestors were to walk in a grocery store today, would they recognize any of the food that was there, any of the food that were available, right? And so they might know the kind of when you walk in the store, it's usually the vegetables and fruit sections, so they would kind of really know those products. But things that are in packages, boxes, containers, canned goods and stuff, would they recognize those? Would they even know that these were foods? So we kind of want to remember that, right? So, and remember that water's life, water's important. Our diet today, right? So we kind of like, there's a lot of commodity foods, these fast foods, right? So, and they're processed, right? So there are challenges in the preparation stuff. So, and we got to look at food insecurity, right? So the high cost of food, loss of access to land, time pressure, and the knowledge related to foods, right? So, in our hectic, busy lifestyles, we can drive up to this place in a window, ask for some of these products, and then we get handed out these things, and we don't have to even do the dishes. They come in the containers, right? So these fast foods, and we have to think about, are they really food, right? Is it really food? And kind of, does it break down and go back to Mother Earth, right? So I think I don't have it with me, but we have I have a Big Mac meal that is from 2011. There is no mold, there's no slime, there's no rot, in it. The fries are just there, right? So it didn't decompose or anything. So most people, I think, have seen a moldy slice of bread, right? So that mold goes on. That's natural process of that taking that back into back to Mother Earth. Sometimes we've forgotten about those vegetables we left in that vegetable crisper and open it up, and we kind of like see that water in the bottom and that slimy head of lettuce kind of thing, right? And that's that natural happening, that it's breaking down, it's going back to Mother Earth, right? So when these other fast food restaurants foods that don't break down, are they really food, right? Is it fast food or is it fast filler kind of thing? And think about that. So, and this is not to make anyone feel guilty or anything, and just helping to bring that awareness, right? Because if we don't know, right, and we have this on a constant basis, then we're not getting real of the nutrients and nutrition that we need to be healthy and well as we can be. So here's kind of our roots, a history of our food. That's kind of important to kind of know that these things, right? So of course we know that the fur trade happened. The settlers came to Turtle Island, kind of introduced kind of that monetary system, but also they brought flour and salt, sugar, those things, right? So kind of those 5 white gifts that they brought, right? So the establishment of reserves. So we were taken, as mentioned, taken from our homelands and put on different lands, and we were forcibly removed, driven out of those lands. It was illegal to hunt or harvest. We lost a lot of our roles and responsibilities. And then later on, that was introduction to those 5 white gifts. The residential schools were established, and we know that awful things were happened. Roles and responsibilities were taken away. Even that loss of language, of culture, even love, and that was taken away. So there wasn't that ability to relate with one another. The Industrial Revolution happened. So previously there was gardens. People started having gardens. We were allowed to have gardens again. So kind of someone would have an awesome crop of tomatoes, and another family would have an awesome crop of cucumbers. We knew Joe, who was the pig farmer and stuff. So there was a lot of trading for each other. So we would have different things to help us get through to eat and thrive. So then there was, the automation. So there was manufacturing processes, the cars, a refrigerator was made, microwaves, TV dinners. So it was kind of like, that industrial kind of revolution, and the grocery stores were established. So then talked about that fast food. So the first fast food restaurant was A&W in 1916, and that was that's a while back. And McDonald's was circa 1950, right? So then we see kinds of almost every other corner you can see some type of fast food outlet. And then 1949, it says diabetes began to be recognized or not being recognized, but was heard of in Indigenous communities. So people were starting to get diagnosed with diabetes. And then we looked at the food industry, that thing, and the service industry, right? Portion sizes, you go to that one restaurant because they give you such big portions that it will feed the family of 4, right? So you have a lot of leftovers. So you go there, it's reasonable price, get leftovers, take home, give for the next day. So that kind of and then we've come to this buffet kind of mindset, right? So buffets, you can go in and you pay your price and you can get as many plates of food as you want, right? So that, and you're going to get your money's worth, right? You're not going to just take that, that kind of that balanced meal that one plate of your vegetables and your meat and some other kind of maybe the treat fried foods and stuff, right? No, you're going to go back up like 2-3 times plus get your dessert. And so it's become this kind of that westernized mindset. Right? So, a lot of other different foods that have come in, and not really foods, but the pesticides on the crops and the artificial sweeteners and different things. And then we looked at technology, right? So, and it's technology can be a good both benefit and not so great benefit, right? So we have people aren't as active as they are playing on one of those games or doing marathons. Some people, some kids, young adults will play a game for like a whole weekend. They're doing things to stay awake, playing, and the only exercise that they get is from their thumbs and moving their hands on that remote control kind of thing, right? So kind of look at that. So and it's diabetes has become an epidemic in our Indigenous communities. So we were talking about yesterday, right? So that activity, so everything had a role and responsibility where, we didn't have time to sit down and watch TV for a minute or like so. And today we have a lot of couch potatoes. We're driving to the corner stores, we're going for walks. And then also we have this clock there, right? And it talks about that is like kind of adds stress to us, right? We always like by the clock, we have to do this, we have to do this and be on the ball. And, and our hectic lifestyles too has changed drastically, right? So, we get into this rhythm of we get up, get ready for work, as well as we're getting our kids up ready for school and make sure that they eat something and kind of like, things happen and trying to go. And then you get into your car to get to where you got to go or drop the kids off or get them ready for the bus and things. And over time, it just becomes a chronic thing, right? And it's that added stress as well, right? So we're kind of getting, if traffic is low, we're going to be late for work. It's that stress and it's just kind of on top of things, right? So, and we talked about, kind of our ancestors, the stress wasn't really heard of as today. The stress may be, there's an animal coming at me. Do I run? Do I, hit it with an arrow and kill it for the community? Or do I just like freeze kind of thing, right? So that kind of was like the stressor levels, we call it, right? And then now today we talk all about stress, and stress levels are constant. It does have a huge impact on us. And it leads to a lot of other things too, other than just, impact with our type 2 diabetes, but also, it creates high blood pressure, stress levels, cholesterol levels. So kind of like those big changes, and kind of look at that and be aware and kind of adapt and try and make those little changes. So we have a lot of strength and healing and resiliency, right? So despite the challenges associated with the impacts of colonizations, many of our Indigenous communities are taking steps to reclaim their health in many ways, right? So we kind of look at that and kind of relearn the ways of our Indigenous food diets, land-based practices, our traditional knowledge and teachings, our traditional medicines, self-determination. Because remember that when they established reserves, they also outlawed any of our practices, any of our ceremonies. We couldn't dance any longer, we couldn't speak our languages. And so everything kind of went underground. So everything was kind of hidden. People still kept those knowledge base, but it was very secretive. It was only shared with who they knew, and they knew it wasn't going to be come out, and the Indian agent wasn't going to find out. So if you want to learn more about what Indian agents were back then, it's, this whole complicated of the reserve establishment and trying to keep us there. And we had to get permission to even leave there for certain whatever reasons, right? So and then so now we're really thriving and getting back into those things, and it's helping a lot. We've seen a lot of these connections really help with our physical and mental health, right? So, and finding that balance between mind, body, spirit, and emotion, and finding balance in our whole bodies does huge wonders instead of, just focusing on that one health part. So with IDHC, really, instead of just looking at just diabetes, we look at the whole body. We look at the whole mind, body, spirit, and emotions, and kind of bring in those teachings and kind of help people do those connections. So the number of kids rising, right? So we kind of want to really, it's really important. And they mentioned that, if more and more of our young kids are getting type 2 diabetes and not managing well, and a lot of complications are setting in, then it's very alarming. And this study was back from 2008, which is a long time. And so, kind of, we've been statisticized through the roof, right? And nobody wants to have all these studies done again and research, and because where is it going? We've done a lot of things, but this is really important, and it's really important for our kids. And so we know we want to do for our kids the best we can, right? We want to give them what we didn't have growing up, right? And so sometimes those things aren't the best things for our kids. We want them to be, right? We want them to be. So if you're younger and we didn't have, different snacks and stuff, and then today, our kids want those things. We want what their peers have at school and things, and kind of looking at those things and really see those teachings with that. So that comes with that. So we wanted to, be able to make those more informed choices, and that awareness, bring that on. Right? So kind of, and remember those teachings that we have, that what we do today affects the next 7 generations to come, as well as what our ancestors did, the 7 generations that came before us, what they did for us today. So kind of keeping in those minds, right? So what we can change today is going to benefit the next generations. So adapting to life with diabetes, right? So it's really heavy. It's shocking. A lot of people react differently. And so that, go through a lot of the different stages when they're first diagnosed with diabetes, right? So, and kind of be aware of the steps that individuals take to effectively manage the diabetes. So it's be a really emotional experience and difficult to accept. Sometimes it may come as a relief to finally know and understand why we're going through that, and what the emissions people have been experiencing. Right. So, and once it's known why these things are happening or why we're feeling this way, it's easier to understand what needs to happen. Right. So sometimes with diabetes, people don't really feel really ill, right? They may feel something's off, and with struggle get through with the headaches and being tired and things. But when people are diagnosed with other diseases, then it's really shocking, and they want to know what they can do right now to cure it. They want to get better and heal. And one example of that is cancer, right? And that's another disease that's happening a lot in our communities. So the initial shock is like, oh my God, I don't want to die. What can I do right now? And so with diabetes, it's a lot different, but actually our bodies are breaking down and doing, and a lot of damage is happening to us almost on the same way, right? And so kind of we want to make sure that stress, that it's important to really get on top of this so that these awful things aren't happening to our bodies, right? So yeah, with those stages, some people can get this diagnosis and go on and really make the changes that they need and give them full props for that. They can do that. And other people really struggle and don't know where to start. So, and and realize that it's an individual journey for each person, right? So we want to share, we want to help people, friends and family. Like, well, I take this for my diabetes. How come your doctor didn't give you that? And here, try some. And kind of like we want to help, but we have to understand that it's and I might not work the same for everyone else. So we want to kind of learn the best we can. So, and then kind of talk about, the stages of grief, right? So we have that, kind of, sometimes it's also, it's numb, right? So we have a different way of coping, right? So we gotta learn how to learn to cope with that. So just to remember that Grandmother Moon is here and we're never alone. She reminds us that there's a time and change for everything. Right? So this includes the importance of changing unhealthy behaviors and the healing that flows, right? So once healing can start, a lot of things really happen harmoniously, right? Kind of I'm trying to find those words that kind of bring us together and help to heal that, bring that together, that mind, body, spirit, and emotions, and bring that balance, right? So. And it's also important for frontline workers to understand that any given person can be and may be in the stage of grief or multiple stages at one time, right? So it's we've heard different nurses or whatever go into medical checkups and they're like, well, why are you still eating the same things, or why can't you quit smoking and things. And change for a person is individual, and there's different coping mechanisms and why they aren't making those changes. And that's, we have to understand that and try to help them and guide them along, right? So, and it's really beneficial for the frontline workers to be familiar with that they're going through these different stages and recognize that they're going through these different stages so that they can communicate with the clients and community in a positive and reassuring way. So diabetes can add to stress, right? And as mentioned, stress does huge things, has a huge impact for us, but it can be the one thing that really topples things over, right? So other concerns to the added diagnosis of stress is, needing to take time off for work to go to medical appointments, not being able to afford medical supplies or proper care. Some of these things aren't covered by, if you don't have non-insured health benefits, or they have a limit on what they cover and what they don't have. So, that's really a struggle. It's a huge struggle for a lot of people. Managing family while managing self and trying to make those new changes. So it can be hard. So when you want to change things, and for example, you want to start eating more vegetables at meals, and then if your family's like, oh, what's this? We don't want this kind of thing, and that it's a struggle. And sometimes that happens on a daily basis or daily struggles with people anyway. But on top of that, with knowing that you have living with diabetes and you want to change that, it's things. So, and it's also very stressful to lose someone with diabetes complications, right? So the complications of them passing away is very hard. My parents both passed away from different complications of diabetes, and they passed away 3 weeks apart from each other. So it was a real struggle. It was traumatic for us to go through that. And so that's, very, it was hard. And watching them go through that, like I said, they had lived with a lot of different complications over the years. So my dad ended up passing away from the complications of his organs shutting down. So that was really, that was hard, and it's not talked about a lot either as in the complications, but that's, but if you think about, if those body cells aren't getting the energy and the insulin or the glucose that they need, then of course they're going to die off, and that affects the whole body. So it affects whole parts of the body. So, but we kind of talk about the real complications that happen a lot and are heard about a lot. So there's still things that are happening that aren't talked about as much, but it does happen. Right? So being told that you have a complication of diabetes is really hard as well. And that goes with, getting the diagnosis and living with the complication at the same time is double that, the stress and the huge impacts that it has on us. So, and then also struggle to monitor your health every day on top of everything else, right? So you kind of maybe forget to take your glucose levels in the morning or during lunch or something like that, after lunch. Having to inject insulin every day, that's huge, right? And so I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes with my son. So I had my girls, and my girls were 22 and 21 when I had Zachary. So he was the one I got gestational diabetes with, and so having to have insulin injections, and that it was kind of real hard mentally thinking about that, and not that added stress, right? So I was walking all the time. I was monitoring what I was eating healthy and that, but nobody really asked about the stress that I was going through, and I was going through a lot at the time. We just bought a house, mortgage, that kind of stuff, and being older and not getting the best support from my doctor, and there's a lot of other complicated things. So then get diagnosed with gestational, like, how does this happen? I'm a diabetes worker. It's not supposed to happen, right? But due to my age and hormones and a whole bunch of things, they didn't know why it happened, but it did, right? And so I had to go on insulin. So really getting that mindset of having to put a needle in my tummy where baby's right there, kind of, and I know it wasn't there, but it was that mentality of having to do that. And, so kind of that struggles is real. It's that hard, that getting around those very, very stressful situations. And then, as we know, the more stress, the higher our levels go. And it's just kind of that ongoing vicious cycle that we have until we can cope and try and manage. So the 5 stages of grief we talk about. So they may go in different, react in different ways, but frontline workers can use this framework to discuss loss, and then what they can help with their journey and find, quote, their new normal, right? And it's not, how to adjust the best way they can, right? So the stages include shock or denial, anger and resentment, withdrawal or depression, bargaining, acceptance, or adaptation, right? So that first diagnosis is shock. It's like, it hit hard, right? Or that's not true. I'm going to test again. And when I test, my levels are fine, right? So I think their machines are out of whack. That's I don't have to be kind of thing. And that's that denial, right? Anger and resentment, of course, anger at the person that did diagnose your doctor, or anger at yourself or others, right? It's just that initial kind of reaction sometimes, right? So other people, my best friend, I go to visit her one day, and she has one of those juice jugs on her table, and she picks it up, and there's about this much water in the bottom. She says, I've had 3 of these today and I still can't quench my thirst. I'm so thirsty. I don't know what's going on. And so I'm like, you really need to go talk to your doctor and get some blood work done and see what's going on with you. And so, of course, a couple weeks later, she come back, and it's like she stomps in, and she kind of looks at me. She puts her hands on her hip. She's like, doctor told me I have diabetes. Now, if I didn't listen to you, I wouldn't have it. And kind of that, that initial kind of thing from myself too. And I kind of knew that, this is how she's going to cope right now. This is not to take it personally, just knowing that this is the thing that she's going through right now. And just let her talk. And of course we talked it out. We talked more, and kind of her initial reaction as she sat down, we both kind of cried and had a lot of talking and kind of helped her the best way that I could at the time. Also, like with the depression, people, kind of don't want to deal with anybody. They don't want to go out and do what they normally did anymore, or they want to associate with people, kind of thing. Bargaining is that kind of like in the mind, either to Creator, God, if you just help me get through this, or help me get rid of it, I'll do this better. Or if you can just make the diagnosis go away, I will do this. Or, kind of that, that's that bargaining thing, right? And then there's other who accept this and adapt it. And those, this can really help and help others as well, and then just sharing too, as well as, how to help each other and get through the best way we can. And of course, these stages can come in throughout the years and not just upon diagnosis, right? So, people may go back and forth, but it's important to not get stuck in these, but, sometimes it happens. So we need that, give them the support and encouragement to, and give them that motivation and the growth, right? So that kind of helps to develop that healthy healing process. So in making change, right? So there's a number of steps that we can take in order to make change, and kind of just as these stages is making the process of the change. So it's, learn all you can about diabetes, what it's doing to us, and why did we get prescribed this? Why did we get this, and what is it doing for us, right? And we come to kind of with socialization and things that we kind of give our healthcare to somebody else, right? So we go see a doctor, and they send us for a bunch of tests. We go back, and then they kind of scribble on this piece of paper, right? So we're going to prescribe you this, and this. They give you that piece of paper, and so then you take it to the pharmacy and you hand that piece of paper over to the clerk. They call your name in a little bit and hand you this bag of either pills, medicine, or what have you. And then you walk away and go home and kind of take it as they told you. There is a lot more care now. There's a lot more time being taken care of because, with the Western medical side, you go to your doctor's office, or before pre-COVID, you would see these signs, can only talk about one issue at a time or one concern at a time, kind of thing. And if you got a lot of things going on, then, you're not, what one thing do you talk about, kind of thing, right? And then so they rush you in and rush you out, kind of without a lot of explanation or a lot of talk thing. But it slowly changes. Some doctors will kind of sit down and take a few minutes to help explain what's going on and why you're being prescribed these things for you. Also, the pharmacy now, it's their duty to make sure that you understand what the medications are for, how to take it. Of course, you get this big write-up, this printout that goes in with it, where all the, the different side effects that can happen, or what the medication, what medical terms mean, and all that. But they also have the due diligence to sit with you and kind of explain what they are, what they're doing for you, and that. So take the time to ask the questions, right? So kind of helping that. So there's a lot of and there's a lot more people out there as a team to help with that now. So we have more diabetes education centers with diabetes education nurses, the dietitians, nutritionists, kinesiologists. So there's a team that can help with a lot of different things now, right? So things is learn how to express our feelings and teach how to express feelings in a healthy way. Assess the unhealthy behaviors and thoughts and habits and their effects on others and things. So, and sometimes that's kind of a slow process, but then the reality hits, and then we're able to make those changes and commit to change, right? So, kind of we have kind of these a wellness journal is really helpful, beneficial. Kind of help if you're a journal writer, then you can write down things and kind of make a plan, make steps how you're going to make these changes, and find your personal and community and organizational supports, right? Reach out. Don't be hesitant to do it all on your own. You're not expected to do it all on your own. There's a lot of things out there, so reach out, and that's the first step, right, to finding that comfort. So it's really important to monitor your glucose levels and being conscious of what that means, right? So it can decrease the risk of complications, and really important to test regularly at different times of the day, especially when you're newly diagnosed, to find out how things affect you, how these changes are, the meals that you have. So with this, before meals, your levels should be between 4 and 7 on that glucometer. 2 hours after meal it should be 5 and 10, or 4 and 10. And target ranges may differ for individuals, and so remember that we're all unique. Watching my parents both living with type 2 diabetes, my mom would cook dinner for all of us. We'd all have the same meal, and we'd eat, and then later on they would be testing their glucose levels. So my dad would check, and his would be fine, he's normal, and then my mom's would be high. And so it's like, oh my goodness, like, what did I eat? We all ate the same thing. And so that meal had a different effect on her, and not only the meal, but that other stress that she was going through. And so it kind of learn and see what works on you. Like, so some things, foods that you eat will have a different effect than someone else in your own family. Kind of keep record these levels so you can see the progress and the trends, and see what's happening. Meters nowadays too are much more advanced. You can have an app. There's an app that you can hook up to your computer or your phone, and it'll give you out a reading of what the average levels were over a week. It'll kind of even tell you when it's in the green is safe, yellow is a warning, it's a little bit higher elevated, and the red is high, right? So a lot of different technical capabilities of these new monitors to help us really so. But it's important that you know what's going on, right? So, and then test if you're not feeling well, or if you're having a low blood glucose reaction. Some people can have those as well, and that's a serious thing too. So that is anything below a 3 is low blood glucose. Well, anything below a 4 and anything below a 3 is kind of an emergency. So checking, kind of monitoring that. So it's taking responsibility and learn how we manage our glucose levels. So, and it's kind of nobody wants to pick their fingers all the time, and it becomes sore in that. But there's tips. So sometimes different spots, you don't want to poke right on your tips, your pads of your finger, because that's the pressure points, right? So if you kind of test on the kind of maybe on the sides of your fingers, doesn't hurt as well or hurt as much. Also, there's different testing supplies. There's different types of sizes of needles and stuff. So really talk to your pharmacist or healthcare on kind of what the best meter and strips and testing supplies are for you. So being diagnosed can be an opportunity to make positive changes to help live a healthy life and become an example to others, right? So there is a movie created out there called The Gift of Diabetes. And you can get it through the National Film Board. You can watch it for free on there. And it's a story of an Indigenous man named Brian Whitford, and he had been struggling with type 2 diabetes for a number of years, and gets diagnosed that he has half kidney function left. He only has 50% of kidney function left. So that kind of kicks him into high gear, and how can he manage it? But also, he wasn't connected with these cultures, so he goes on a journey to connect with various traditional healers and elders to learn more about his culture and learn about the traditional medicines that could help and stuff. And it's so he called it The Gift of Diabetes because it gave him the chance to reconnect with his culture, give him a chance to make the changes he needed to make. So it's a really good story, and a lot of people relate to it and some of the things that he was going through. And it helps people to realize that you're not in it alone. Even though you're an individual and things work with you differently, that there's still help out there with coping and helping with others that can give a huge impact for us in helping us cope, right? So kind of that comfort level, right? And kind of relate. So it helps to kind of ease our minds on just how we can adapt and make changes. There you go. So what can we do, right? So we want to choose a healthy, balanced meal plan. And what is that, right? So eat foods from Mother Earth, right? Can we talk about healthy eating, but what is that, right? So healthy eating is kind of, a lot of different things in eating healthy, but kind of like foods from Mother Earth, things that don't come in a box or a can, nothing with high processed things, right? So drink plenty of water, be active, get involved with sports if you can and recreational activities. You don't have to really join a gym to be active, right? So you don't have to jog miles and miles to be active. There's other things. So small steps make huge impacts in our lives, right? So it's always important as well to, before joining a class or whatever, to make sure that you test what your glucose levels are, check if you have any other complications going on. You want to be monitored and do that. But let's say that we can't be active, right, sitting. So if we have to sit, there's a lot of things that we can do. So learning about those different ways to be active still and not having, be extraneous, and then build up. So, small steps, going for a 5-minute walk and building, do that for a week. And then next time you go out for 10 minutes and then increase so that you're walking for half an hour every day, which is great. Right? So get your family involved. So go for walks after dinner, just playing with the kids is being active. Walk off your anger or frustration or depression, right? So if you're having a bad day, studies show that just being in nature, by being by a tree, reduces your stress levels by 30%. So it's that connection, right? So we connect with Mother Earth, that, she gives us comfort in many, many ways. And be proud of her culture. And that is so huge in our communities where we've been treated badly. We have all these stereotypes, and we kind of shy away from that, right? We don't want to really be visible or admit that we're Indigenous, and that's a struggle that's a reality for a lot of people. It's like I've had things happen to me where it's just like, I don't know why. Why is this things happening? And so kind of be quiet and not really want to commit and stuff. But over the years, learning and getting supports that I needed, and a lot of teachings from our elders and grandmothers, and a lot of different other just people too, has helped me to be proud and just not shy away from it, and I find my voice when needed, right? So not saying I'm overreacting or anything, but just in the moment when it's needed. And be part of culture, whether that's there's a lot of things with culture, right? So that's just people think kind of that it's going to a powwow that's house, but there's also different things. If you know of a craft that kind of comes from the land or what have you, or just singing a song, right? So there's a lot of ways. So just be creative and kind of figure, small steps, reach out, find out, and kind of get there. Right? We'll get there. So what can we do? So we have to remember, so take care of ourselves, right? So if we're not well, how do we take care of others, right? And that's the first kind of priority. And that's not a shameful thing. It's not awful to think about taking care of ourselves or doing some self-care for us, because it really helps and re-energizes, and that to help us take care of our families and communities, right? So as being healthcare providers, frontline workers, that we want to really help our communities and those families, right? And so we need to be the best as we can be, right? Taking care of Mother Earth, and that's kind of just there's a lot of different ways. You don't have to be out there in front lines, but it helps. I mean, but there's ways that we take care of Mother Earth in our own individual ways, and just finding that way is up to you. But kind of see that picture, that water, that little plant, right? So just taking care of, planting a little plant, or there's so many opportunities for that taking care, and connect our mind, body, and spirit. And that's really important, to not just focus on the one thing, but how it affects the rest of our body, right? And so we can find those connections, then that really beneficial for us. And that's what it ripples, right? It's like that, throwing that pebble into that water, and we see how it ripple effects, and it spreads out to from ourselves to our families, to our communities, and spreading that good care, and that the wellness, right? So, and finding just diabetes wellness, but wellness in our communities. So it's important.